So now you have your SharePoint server installed. Let's go through the configuration process. There are a couple of steps through here that we're going to walk through, and know that there's tons of things that need to be or can be configured inside of SharePoint. We're going to cover some of the highlights of it, but you'll have lots of fun exploring through and finding all of the details as you go through the system. First thing we're going to look at is central administration. Then we're going to go through some of the post-installation tasks that you should do to make sure everything's working well. Look at the service applications that get installed by default and some of the things that you can do around those. We're going to do a demo to go look at the live central administration, look at managed accounts, and look at configuring emails. And then we're going to go through a demo on both of those as well to show you how it works on your server. So without further ado, I bring you Central Administration. Central Administration is the heart of SharePoint. Basically, if you can get here, you can generally change or fix what you need. Whenever you run into problems with SharePoint or whenever you're kind of worried about what's happening, and there will be times, go to Central Administration. If you can get there, you're generally in good shape. You can make things work. If something happens and you're having trouble getting to Central Administration, you're probably going to be looking at something fairly deeper to work with. So just know that. You can find it on the start screen, or I recommend you bookmark it. When we go to the demo, I'll show you on the start screen where it is, and then we'll pop over into the actual bookmark location. For post-installation, what you should actually do is review your system settings, make sure that everything's in good shape, make sure that you're where you want to be. Review the default settings on the web applications. We're going to go through and take a look and see what's there, what you've got. Create the default site collection. You should already have this designed as a template. You should know what's going to be going in place. When we start working with that, you'll see that it's basically where we ended up at the end of the configuration in a previous module when we installed, and you'll see that now we get to choose what actually shows up in that location without it really asking us. Review the installed services. This has two purposes. You want to go in and see what services you have, and you also want to make sure that you know which ones are active and which ones aren't, and know under what conditions they're running. Review the content databases. If you're getting prepared for an update, you want to make sure you know what content databases you already have, where you may have naming conflicts, how you're actually putting things in place, what sizes are set, and many things like that. Remember, the content database is the heart of SharePoint. It's where everything goes and where everything ends up passing through, even if it's not stored. So you need to be aware of that and keep an eye on those content databases. The service applications are similar to the operating system services. They'll actually provide support, provide capabilities inside of SharePoint. Majority of SharePoint functionality ends up in a service somewhere along the line. Again, just like the operating system. You kind of see those similarities as you move back and forth between the operating system and the SharePoint servers. A lot of it's kind of based upon modularity, being able to activate and deactivate to be able to make sure those pieces are in place, to make sure there are some consistent interfaces so that everything goes in, and if it has any problems, it can be shut down without taking down the rest of the farm. So you need to know what's in there and what the situations are. You'll need to review the services available and their state. So you need to know what's running, where you have challenges, where you may need to add some additional pieces. If you have custom services that you've installed through maybe scripting the process, make sure that they're all in place and they have all the resources they need. This is what the service application looks like. Again, for the demo, we're actually going to go through here and see what's actually installed inside the system. For the demo, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to Central Administration. We're going to set the time zone on the default web application. We're going to review the database configuration. We're going to review the service applications. And then we're going to review the farm servers. For our install, we're pretty much on our own for this one, but as you put together those topographies, you're going to want to see what's going on in there. So here we are at our SharePoint server install. The first thing we're going to do is find our central administration. So we'll go down to our start screen, and you'll see right over here on our tiles, we have our SharePoint 2013 Central Administration. Click on that. It'll let us know that something interesting is happening. We'll go ahead and let this go. And you'll see IE come up. And we'll connect into our Central Administration site, which you'll notice is 37120 port. There are a couple of unique ports on SharePoint, so you should be aware of those, especially when you're doing those planning for the network access, as we mentioned in the very first section. So what we've got here is our Central Administration site. You'll notice that SharePoint Health Analyzer has detected some items that we'll need to look at. We're not going to look at that right now. We're going to come back to that in the Diagnostics and Logging section and take a look and see what we've got. First thing we're going to look at is we're going to set the default time zone for our web application, our default web application. So what happens with that is our users would like to actually have the time that's in SharePoint in whatever their time zone is. So we're going to go to Manage Our Web Applications. You notice we actually have our SharePoint 80, which is our default port 80 website, which comes in, and then you can see we've got our Central Administration and our proper site there. So we'll click on the SharePoint 80, and we'll go into General Settings and work on General Settings. Amazingly enough, what we'll do is we'll set the time zone here. Right now we happen to be in Central Time Zone. If wherever you may happen to be, you can set your time zone appropriately. You can actually come through and take a look. We haven't done a lot of configuration yet, so you can see that we've got a full list of all of the items that we can have in this web application. Everything from the blog API to accept the username and password from the API. This is what your devs will like. Browser file handling, permissive or strict. We start off with strict, generally always in the default. And all of the different items there. Can you send the username and password in email? Yes or no? So if they get in trouble, they can actually access the site or work with that. Master pages, recycle bin. We'll go through a lot of these afterwards when we come back through for this site settings. So, and you notice default user cookie status is by default off, which we like to see. So we'll close that out. We've saved our item. And we'll go back to Central Administration. And we're going to look at our content databases now from our demo item that we're going to do. And we have one content database. Currently we have two site collections, our default that we saw, which doesn't have a template yet, and our administration. The database is started. It is not read-only, so we can actually add things. We've got get a warning at site collection level of 2,000, and as administrator we'll be cut off from adding new sites once we get to a total of 5,000. These can be modified, and that we'll know about that. We can actually set a preferred time server if we want to, if we've got a corporate headquarters that we want to make sure that everything's always connected with. What that also means, though, is that we can actually set up content databases around the world or content databases for particular areas in the world and actually have that time zone that we set be appropriate to where the users are. This is one of those things that users really like to see and that really helps them identify with SharePoint. If you're on the East Coast and everything's always set to the West Coast time, as administrators, you've probably seen that a lot when you do new installs. You have to always go change it to be, you don't have to do those the math to do the time zone shift. This will allow your users not to have to worry about that. So there we go on the database configuration. Let's also go back to Central Administration again. It's always a good place to go back into. And now let's take a look at our services. So we're going to take a look at our service applications. And we're going to see that we actually have right now a lot of services already installed. We get a lot of things in place. Access Services 2010, Access Services Web Application, Web Service Application, App Management, Business Connectivity. We've got a lot of capabilities already built into SharePoint, installed by default. We can look through and see that they're all started. We can actually make sure that we're in good shape. Visual Studio, Visio Graphics services already there, Word Automation. So we've got we're sitting well with our services. We'll go in and make sure that everything's happy on the service itself. You can see that we've got the capability to go in, do some maximum columns per query. This is all custom to the Access services, so we can go in and set our properties or anything that we need on each of these services. So when you're going through, when you see those services available, you can actually know what's going on later on. When you're trying to figure out what's happening, you can actually tweak these and make them and optimize them for whatever your setup is. So now we've seen what our services are and seen how we actually go and set configuration on those services. Go back to our central administration. And now we'll take a look at manage the servers in the farm. Again, we'll notice that we have one server. We did a single server, so we're okay. We have our configuration database version, so we know what's happening in the farm itself. This keeps all of the servers in sync. We know where the database server is. We know the configuration database name. And then we can see our poor little server here with all of the servers allocated to it. No action required on the status, and we can remove this server if we want to, but since it's the only server in the farm, that probably wouldn't be what we'd like to do, so let's leave that there for now. If we had other servers that had SharePoint on it, we could actually add those into the farm and pull some of this loading off of that server and put it into place. So one of the features to take a look at when you're setting up your SharePoint server is managed accounts. Managed accounts are accounts contained within SharePoint. They're actually accounts that are turned over to SharePoint to manage. They are Active Directory accounts, but SharePoint can do certain things such as reset the password to comply with your AD requirements for password changes, but also make it so that you don't have situations where maybe it's not noticed or it slips through some of your processes, a password gets out of date, the account gets locked, and services aren't being run. So the key benefit there is that the SharePoint can go through and automatically update those passwords for account not normally logged into. That means that you can actually have those services managed. They can actually go through and be part of your process in the fact that they are isolated and they are you can actually track them. But then you can also notice if someone's trying to use them for something they shouldn't have, because if SharePoint is changing the password appropriately, then you're going to have someone go in and reset the password so that a human can log in, because they won't have those passwords will be maintained by SharePoint instead of a human. So we'll take a look at that in just a minute. The other piece that we're going to look at is configuring email. SharePoint makes a lot of use of email. When users are set up on a new site, they get sent email. They actually can be sent alerts and notifications inside of email. And though it's not used all that much in my experience, it's a very interesting capability of being able to store inbound emails or actually gather attachments off of emails and put them in document libraries. You've seen capabilities in consumer applications such as forward your flight ticket to a travel service and it parses it out and lets you know what's going on, or parse maybe a document to your e-reader. SharePoint has had that for quite a while. It's interesting to see consumer products picking up something that SharePoint has been able to do for a while. That being said, not usually people haven't taken advantage of it that much, and we really want to encourage that because it's very, very useful to have. Users think a lot in email, or at least traditional users, so being able to send a query as an email, set up notifications for your inbound email, know what's going on, that a document is waiting in your workflow, sending that becomes very important. So these are features that SharePoint has had for a while, as a matter of fact, far back into the history, but with SharePoint 2013, we get another capability, and that is the ability to send SMS notifications. We're in a mobile world, and people are moving more and more to SMS messages. SharePoint can also send those as notifications as well to be able to work with your system and work with how your users operate. We do want them to be happy. We want the users to buy in, so we want to make sure that they've got the information in the form that they want. So here we are at the central administration page again. We're going to set up a managed account. So first thing we need to do is actually come down, and we're going to need to create an account to give to SharePoint to manage. So we bring up our Active Directory service, and we're going to create a new user for our server. First name is going to be and we're going to have it as my domain and SP service in a fit of originality. All right. I am required that to have the user change the password at the next login. So I will go in and change that to basically that's fine. And we're going to go ahead and create that user, iDomain SP service. We'll give that a moment and let our Active Directory create the user. We'll come down and do a check. SharePoint server is our user login SP service. So we have our account. Now we'll go into security on the central administration page, and then we'll go into configure managed accounts. We're going to register a managed account. Now we have our site where we're going to register the account as a managed account. You notice across the top it's giving us a warning that says the page is not encrypted for secure communications. Up at the top you'll see that we're still doing HTTP rather than HTTPS. That means that if we were doing this from, say, an airport, I wouldn't recommend putting in these service credentials and passwords. But if we're doing this on the server itself, so we're probably not going to have much of a problem with a man-in-the-middle attack. Just know that SharePoint will let you know when you're putting in credentials and you're not using a secure socket. So you'll be aware of it, and you'll won't make that mistake outside of your firewall. So we'll put in our account, my SP service, my password, and right down here I can click on Enable Automatic Password Change. At that point I would let SharePoint have complete access to and control of the password on the account. I'd still be able to go back and reset the password if I needed to get into this account, but when the password expiration policy had hit, then 2 days before it would change the password. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say, I want you to have this. I want you to be able to log in. This also means that you don't, if you're adding databases, you don't have to enter in the account that has permissions to do that, as you might have in 2007 and 2010. So there's some additional reasons to do that. I'm just going to have this account go in. I'm going to maintain the control of the account password change, and we're going to register this as a managed account. You can see now we've got our username here. We don't have a password change schedule. We don't have a next password because I kept that control, but it does know when the password was changed. So we go on that. Now we can remove that account if we want to right there, or we can keep rolling from there. So that's how you set up your managed accounts. You can have as many of those as you want and set those up so that you don't have to worry about those nasty accounts locked out on your services. So we'll go back to Central Administration. And so to configure email, we go into System Settings. And set up our email and text SMS. We'll start with outgoing email settings because this is the one most commonly used. And we've got our outbound SMTP server. I've actually gone in and set up the SMTP service on this server, so I'm just going to use and the standard demo account. and we go in. Normally you would put in whatever your organization's SMTP server and probably your admin at your SharePoint location. We go in, set that up, make sure everything's good to go. And now we've got our outbound email session set up. We'll configure our incoming email session settings. We want to enable this server to receive email, which uses the local SMTP service. If you've got Exchange, work with your Exchange administrators to ensure that your server can get those forwarded. We can use the SharePoint Directory Managed Services to create distribution contacts. Normally we would want to do that. I'm just going to leave this right now. And then the email server display address, we can set that so that we would actually know where they could send these emails to go to their lists or to gather that in. But fairly simple. We can tell it what to accept from. If we only want to have our local users accept, we can set in the safe email servers, or if we want to let just anyone be able to send in. Be careful with that, but normally it needs to be pretty well known to make that work. So we're going to go in and we're going to set those in place. We'll let this accept as well. And now we have our outgoing and incoming email set up. We'll actually go in and take a look at the mobile account. If you've got a enterprise SMS service, you go in and enter this and then the account name. You'll actually be able to send those SMS test messages wherever they need to go. Currently, I don't have one of those configured right now, but if you don't have, in your organization, if you don't have a service provider, Microsoft Office Online will give you direct pointers to setting up one of those accounts and enabling SMS messages for your users.